Sure, we're going online. Hey, we're on Rumble. We're on Twitter, YouTube. Come on, YouTube. Tell me you're up. There we are. Hey, we're on YouTube as well. Hot diggity. As they say, hot diggity and dog. Excellent. So we'll give it a couple minutes before we get started, but I'm kind of curious to see if I'm going to get people signing up through Rumble, because Rumble doesn't tie into Restream's chat app. So I'm curious to see how Rumble does when I get this thing set and kicked off. Hey, it shows me as live. Yay. All right. So Rumble's working. I just got to keep an eye on it for comments. That's set. That's set.
You guys got any elections around your area around this time of year?
Yeah,
Minor.
I can't remember what all it is, but we have a couple things coming up.
Yeah, I got city council and school board. We got some like super America First people. It's actually kind of really cool to see at my area. Not for you, Andy.
We have the opposite,
Oh,
and I'm just afraid what's going to happen. I think we might have governor up and another guy in our area. I think the Attorney General, Josh Shapiro, I think his name is. He's running, and
no, I don't have
help
governor
us.
until next year.
I mean, I could be wrong. I can't remember. I just saw the headline really quick and didn't dig too deep into it.
Yeah.
But that's good news for you guys.
Yep. I'm really trying to network around here. Actually, if this works out, I'll be able to help our school board candidates make some videos, maybe if everything goes the way I think it will, hopefully. Because right now I think the biggest issue is at local elections, nobody really shows up. But national, that's when everyone shows up, which is a huge problem because they don't know the power structure and they don't know how immediately that stuff can help them.
Hence the need for education. Well,
yeah.
It's the top of the hour. Let's kick off the fun and games. Hello there, everyday Americans. Welcome to the Constitution Study. This is our live Q&A. I've got several people on the Zoom call with me. Hopefully, I'm seeing a couple people join on the live streams. We are now adding Rumble. So now we are live on Rumble, YouTube, and Twitter, or at least YouTube and Twitter, until they decide to boot me off, which I pretty much figure could be any day now. Being I've already got a warning from YouTube for actually quoting. I asked them, was it my quoting of the CDC website, or was it the peer-reviewed studies that I quoted that they determined was medical misinformation? So you can now join me live on Rumble. I'm curious how many people on Rumble will actually find the live the live broadcast and join us. We will see. As always, if you're not in the Zoom room, you can ask your questions by typing them in the chat. That's why we are here. You bring the questions, I bring the answers. We have a lot of fun doing this, and I'm glad everybody could join me. There's been so much going on lately. I couldn't decide really which of about half a dozen topics to kind of kick the night off with. I usually try to pick one topic to kick the night off with. Is it the the dad who's now considered a domestic terrorist for speaking up at a school board when he found out that his daughter was sexually assaulted in the girls' room by a boy. Or is it the airlines and Southwest and having to cancel flights and whatnot? Is it, hey, we've been complaining about the Democrats trying to bully businesses into promoting their agenda, Elizabeth Warren and all that. Well, now we got the Republicans doing it too. The Republicans, a bunch of Republican members of the House sent a letter to Amazon saying, you should drop OnlyFans. And there is so much going on. I really couldn't pick one that I thought was worth that, but those are ideas that I will throw out as everybody kind of gets their questions aligned and figures out who's going to ask the first question. I will let you know. It looks like I'm going to be in Florida mid-November. I've got a date set, November 10th. It'll be on the tour page probably tomorrow. I just got the details on it. I'm trying to set some other dates up. So if you are in Florida or anywhere between Nashville, Tennessee, and say, Vero Beach, Florida, where I want to end up, and you'd like me to come speak to your group, large or small, head to the website, constitutionstudy.com/tour. You can request I show up there, and I will do my best to make that happen. There's a lot of things going on here at the Constitution Study, but this is a Q&A. So who's got our first question for the night? Come on, I gave you guys a little warning.
I got one if no one else has one.
Go ahead.
Pretty simple, but so anytime you write a check and you said you don't think that you want that, it's bad. It's a bad check, right? So what do? You write void, so it can't be used.
Right.
Should we be doing the same thing for legislation that is not void, or can we just leave it as, well, it's there, but just ignore it?
Well, that's actually a very interesting question because the Supreme Court. Well, actually, there's two gentlemen. One, I've been quoting Alexander Hamilton a lot. Might as well bring him up because let's face it, I love quoting Alexander Hamilton and the Federalist Papers. And I quote him. I quote Federalist Paper 78 so often, I have a shortcut that takes me right to it because I'm referring to it all the time. Where he says, there is no position which depends on clear principles, then that every act of a delegated authority, contrary to the tenor of the commission under which it is exercised, is void. You've also got Marbury versus Madison, where Chief Justice Marshall wrote in the opinion that an act of Congress repugnant to the Constitution is void. Now, but you bring up a very good point. So let's take it, because I want to take your point. I want to spin it just a little bit. So let's take the Florida recent pro-life of Texas law, not Florida, Texas, SB 8. And the courts have put an injunction on it. They've said, it's time. We're not going to let you enforce this until we've had a look at it. But what happens if a court finds that a law is unconstitutional? Well, nobody writes void on the law, right? Because courts don't have the legal authority to change law. So the question then becomes, okay, if the opinion of the court that a law is void is upheld by the states, shouldn't the states effectively write void on that law? Right? That should be the same for, I like the idea because it's the same way you have, you use the example of a check where you're basically saying you're marking it so you can't use the check. But when laws in the US code get repealed, the text mark is marked repealed. Well, gee, wouldn't we like to see the same scenario to have those things repealed? That way, it's no longer question. It's no longer limbo. Interesting enough. So I just wrote an article on the Permanent Apportionment Act of 1929. And what's really interesting is, and I noted this in the article, I went searching for the actual text of the law, and it pointed me to Title II of the United States Code, Section 2, which says the text is omitted. The actual text for the Reapportionment Act of 19, which basically set the size of the House of Representatives to 435, the text is omitted. It's not actually in the U.S. Code. And I checked two different places. I both checked the U.S. Code database on the House of Representatives site, and I checked Cornell Law School. Both of them state that the law that sets the size of Congress at 435, the text of which has been omitted. That gets into a whole other set of questions that actually came up from a question I was asked when I was up in North Dakota about the Permanent Apportionment Act. So that's actually not a half bad idea. Maybe the term void, maybe it's repealed. However, it cannot be voided by the courts because they don't have the legal authority to change legislation. But it could be voided by the states. And when the states, if a majority of the states say, no, sorry, that law is void, then technically, yeah, it should be struck. It should be marked as such in the U.S. Code that the states, the creators of the federal government, said, no, bad federal government, rub your nose in it and then kick you outside. That's actually a very interesting idea. We should consider that.
I just came to that thought because I was thinking about prohibition, and then I think it was in one of your courses actually that you said we don't repeal. It's the amendment's still there, but we had this amendment pop up because we don't want to erase it for future reference. That way we know, hey, this was a bad idea. We fixed it.
Yeah, it's one of the few things. The U.S. Constitution is the only one I found that does that. Most of the state constitutions, if they repeal a section of them, they're actually stricken from the text. You have to go through previous versions to find it. But I like the idea of let's learn from our mistakes. Let's see how we got here. It does make things a little confusing sometimes. It's one of the things I like about the way the U.S. Archive has dealt with the Constitution. I don't like by the way, I haven't yet to see a warning page, but maybe it's because I've bypassed their login page. I'm already going directly to where I'm going. But if you go to founders.archive.gov and you find the Constitution, if a section of the Constitution has been modified or amended in any way, shape, or form, there's a hyperlink that takes you directly to it. So you can tell just by reading it, hey, this has been amended. Let me click the link, go to the amendment to see what was changed. So, but that requires an intelligence well beyond most legislatures and our members that are on that national legislature. So, but yeah, if you have any interest in the apportionment clause, the apportionment acts, I think that's going to come out on the 25th. I think I just set it up. I think it's the one for Monday, the 25th. And it's actually interesting because the Constitution says we should have over 11,000 members of the House. Yeah. So, all right. So who's got our next question?
So I had a question about specifically whether or not the federal government could prescribe how our local elections are ran. Because from Article 2, it just says they may determine the time of choosing the electors and the day which they shall give their votes, which day shall be the same throughout the United States, but I don't see anything else about like literally spelling out how they can do it.
They cannot tell the states how to handle local elections. But Article 1, Section 4 says the times, places, and manner of holding elections for senators and representatives shall be prescribed in each state by the legislature thereof, but the Congress may at any time by law make or alter such regulations, except as the place of choosing senators. So the only elections that Congress has the authority to prescribe, or I should say, modify such regulations is elections for House and Senate. They cannot touch local elections. They can't touch presidential electors. They can only touch the House and Senate. Now, the biggest problem you have is how many states are going to have two election processes, one to satisfy the weenies in Washington and the others for everything else. So,
So wait, do those elections for senators and representatives include state senator and representatives? Or
No,
is that just federal?
only members of the federal House and federal Senate. That's the only place that, remember, you're talking Article 1, you're talking about the election of the federal legislature, the Congress. So only House and Senate, in the US House and Senate, does Congress has the ability to alter regulations, except they can't change the place of choosing electors. In other words, the Congress can't pass a law that says, hey, we're going to let the legislatures appoint electors again. They can't do that. They can't change the how or the place where senators are chosen, but they can set the date. They can alter regulations as far as the elections of House and Senate. Like I said, the biggest problem is most state governments are populated by cowards. And so standing up to Washington saying, all right, legally, you can say we have to have, let's say, mail-in ballots for House and Senate. That's the only thing you can touch. We're going to have in-person elections for everything else, but we'll do mail-in ballots for House and Senate. By the way, we're going to do in-person ballots for presidential electors because that's the limit of Congress's authority over elections is electing their own members. In other words, members of the House, U.S. House, members of the U.S. Senate.
Yeah, see, because I originally thought that whole thing the House wanted to do about like changing stuff up, I thought it had to do with actual state reps as well or something.
Well, they may say they can, but then again, when was the last time you saw a congressman that actually could read the Constitution?
Yeah, never.
What was the latest one? I saw one. Hang on a second. It was one of the things I've been thinking about when I was talking about starting. It doesn't have to do with elections. It's another example of better to keep your mouth shut and be thought a fool than to open your mouth and prove it. Where is it?
You'd be, I think this could be said to everyone here. If you knew your state reps and House reps, you'd be surprised at how much they know what the Constitution actually means, or what it actually says in it, how it reads. Like state reps, I have been thoroughly satisfied and surprised by just how much they know it. But national doesn't, just goes over their head. Yeah. So make friends with your House reps and stuff because they're your biggest allies, your state House reps and senators, if they know the Constitution.
I can't find. There's a spot where Jen Psaki was. People were pointing out. I think it was dealt with the vaccine mandates, and she says, "Well, federal law trumps state law." And I'm like, actually, Ms. Psaki, what the Constitution says is that laws of the United States made pursuant to the Constitution can supersede state law and state constitutions. The crap you're throwing out isn't pursuant to the Constitution. It's null and void. So, yeah. And it would be the same. It would be the exact same if they passed this abomination of an election law, federal election law. The only place it's legally valid is for federal House and federal Senate. So, okay, then like you say, go back to them saying, hey, you do realize that Congress can't tell you how to run your state elections. That includes choosing presidential electors. You realize that the Congress cannot. That is the only power thing they can determine is laws about picking House members and state senators. So
Right.
I'm looking on the live streams. I'm not seeing anybody from Rumble or YouTube or anybody that's asked anything so far. So I'm still looking for questions. I don't know if Restream is telling me that I don't got anybody paying attention to us. So maybe it's just us. No one has joined the live stream yet. So more questions. Who's got another question? Christopher, you haven't asked one yet. I know I keep putting you on the spot. I don't mean, and my goal is not to embarrass you. It's I want to make sure everybody has a chance to, even if it's either ask a question or just have something they want to, a topic they want to discuss. Let's, this is supposed to be time to have some fun and chat about stuff.
And the funniest thing is, some state representatives in other states know more about the Constitution than others, but Illinois pretty much received an F plus for knowing the Constitution, pretty much.
Well, most reps don't know. Most politicians, most lawyers really don't know that much about the Constitution. They know what they've been, the quote unquote constitutional law they were taught in law school. That's why, it's important to meet with them, to educate them, to help them understand the importance of this. They all took an oath to support this document. It's important they understand it. And it's something we can encourage them to do. Like I said, take these. One of the reasons I publish these articles, I do the videos, is so you can take it and share it. And if there's a great article that or a video that informs something one of your state reps is involved with, send it to them. That's what it's there for. It's great sharing material because see, all of us were ignorant until something changed, until something got us to learn for ourselves. And think about it. All of us can think of a time when the Constitution was something we didn't know about, we didn't care about, it didn't really mean anything to us. Something happened that got us interested, got us to start looking at it. We need to be fair and say, okay, what is that thing that will bring it to their attention and show them the importance of it? What is that that appetizer of information that will get them started, and see if we can become part of that. You know what, Tunnel Art? I'm gonna ask you, hey, would you be kind enough to tell the rest of the people here the fun story you told me the other day about you and your local school board?
You're confusing me again. I know who you're talking about. That's somebody else.
Oh, you are? Oh, so I'm sorry. Why do I keep thinking that's you?
Yeah, you had him on your
Oh,
radio.
yeah, that's right. It was Braden. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm sorry about the see now.
But that guy's story was epic. That was awesome.
So let me tell you this guy's story. I actually interviewed him. Gentleman's name is Braden Harvey. And let me find a note that he sent me that started this fun and games. Where'd it go? I
actually emailed him saying he did a great job. I listened to your interview and it was just phenomenal.
So I'll give you the short version because I can't find the notes. We had a great top study. Yeah, you can find it on AmericaOutloud.com. Search for the Constitution study under shows, you'll find it. Basically, his local school board was considering mask and vaccine mandates. Now, I don't know how much they were considering, but it was a topic of conversation. Braden came loaded for bear. He had read state law. He had read the state constitution. He had prepared. He'd even brought friends because there's like a 3-minute time limit for each speaker. So he had brought friends that said, okay, if he runs out of time, they would yield their time to him so he could finish. But what he did, and I wish I could find it because he actually got an article in the local newspaper, and I want to find it because it was really cool. But it was a great example of this. You know what? We can, with a little bit of preparation, we can make a difference. It's amazing what happens when we take a little bit of knowledge and we come in not, what's what I'm looking for. We're not guns a-blazing, right? We're not there trying to shoot people down and all that. But you come in with that where you know your rights, you know the law, and you simply state a matter of fact. And as I remember Braden telling me here when he was first talking about it, basically he showed up and the newspaper, where they wrote it up, they said, hey, he showed up. He actually had quotes from the Wyoming Constitution. He had the Wyoming law to prove that mask mandates and vaccine mandates were illegal. And Braden was telling me it was a great story. So he's up there and of course, he's nervous, right? Most people aren't doing this. So he's up there. He's getting prepared. And every time he would say, if the school board were to do this, it's a crime. Well, there was a sheriff's deputy, there was a law enforcement officer in the room. And every time he would mention that it would be a crime for them to do it, he would look over at the law enforcement officer and said, and it would be your job to arrest them. He basically, if I remember, if I've got this right, he said, listen, if they implement a mask mandate, officer, that's a crime. It would be your job to arrest them. Well, they said, no, we're not going to do a mask mandate. We're not going to do vaccine mandates. But the fact that the local newspaper was impressed that he actually didn't show up with, quotes on the facts and figures of mask effectiveness. He came up and he simply said, listen, the Constitution of Wyoming says this, the laws of Wyoming say this. For you to do this, that would be illegal. Gentlemen, not only is it a crime for you to do this, a law enforcement officer, it's your job to enforce that law. And he made a difference. And it was I met Braden on my tour. It was another example of a little bit of study. If you show up with facts it's not actually, I shouldn't say it, it's not simply showing up with facts. If you show up with an argument that is calm, based in the law, and you have your proof points, you can sway the minds of people. Now, I don't know the people on the school board, but it was an excellent story. It's why I had him on the radio program, because, it was an example of, we don't, it's like, well, what can we do? People say, well, what do you do? Well, you stand up for your rights. Well, if you do, you get arrested. Yeah, maybe. Maybe not. Maybe you can simply stand up at a school board. And again, a school board. This is local stuff. Stand up at a school board, make your case, win your case. Before I got kicked off of Facebook, I got a comment from a lady who said her husband sued some county officials, and in court, apparently the judge made a comment that he had read the Constitution of his state and of the United States and was able to quote them and give a compelling argument. He won the day because he'd done a little research and was willing to use that. And that's the stuff that I think all of us need to be prepared to do, to stand up and say, be willing to stand. I use the example. I think I mentioned this the last time. I was served a federal subpoena. By the way, it has absolutely nothing to do with the Constitution study. A former employee of mine is facing federal criminal charges. I was subpoenaed to testify. Okay. I believe it is my civic duty to show up and testify. Now, so let me walk through this just a little bit. And by the way, hello, Baltimore, North Dakota. I saw you were up there. I got so many things going around. So my point of view is the Constitution protects the right. The Fifth Amendment protects the right of the defendant to compel witnesses in their favor. No, sorry, Sixth Amendment to compel witnesses in their favor. If the defense can compel witnesses in their favor, the prosecution probably should have the power to compel witnesses in their favor as well. So I look at this. I don't like the way it's worded. right? But that's because I'm picky about words. So I get the subpoena. And by the way, it requires I travel. So I got to go to they say they want me out in Arizona because that's where the person currently lives. That's where the case is going on. So, okay, I call up the district attorney's office. I talk to a paralegal. Yes, we want to show up. Yes, this, and we'll arrange a travel and this and that and the other thing. And I said, fine. Just understand, I will not take the vaccine. I will not take a COVID test, and I will only wear a mask under duress, serious duress. And she was like, well, I think you have to wear a mask on an airplane. I says, like I said, I'll wear it if I absolutely have to, but I'm not getting a COVID shot and I'm not getting the test. She called me up the next day and said, we're not going to have you testify. Talk to the lawyer, the attorney. No, we're not going to have you come out here. Okay. Here's the funny part from my standpoint. So I'm still sitting here in my little hands with a federal subpoena. I can't, the background keeps blocking it out. And I can't get them to send me a letter that says, by the way, Mr. Engel, we're rescinding the subpoena. Now I've contacted the office 3-4 times now. A couple of times I said, okay, we'll get back to you. And they never do. And I'm like, well, last time I talked to the paralegal said, we don't do that. I said, you work at a law office. Now imagine I'm sitting here with a lawfully executed subpoena and no documentation other than your word that I'm not going to be, that I don't have to show up. Tell me any lawyer in the country for which that would be acceptable. Oh, so, that's the fun and games, but that again is what comes from this basic understanding, this what I refer to as an acknowledgement of the truth in the Constitution. So, who's got the next question? Have anything on?
I got something.
Go for it.
Okay, so it was Article 4, Section 1 and 2 about I was wondering what these two specifically apply to, sort of, because Section 2, each state shall be entitled to all privileges and immunities of citizens in the several states. And I was wondering what privileges and immunities include.
Everything. In other words, if you, so let's see, what would be a good example? Well, so you have we're familiar with in federal law, right? It was the 14th Amendment. You have you cannot be denied a privilege or immunity. Hang on, so let me get the text up. So I mean, let's say a privilege or immunity is basically something you're allowed to do, or something that they cannot prevent you from doing. All right, so it's a privilege and an immunity. So I'm here in Tennessee. So let's say you get me to come up to Idaho, and in Idaho, let's say, we'll pick on the guns because I like picking on guns when I travel. What's the rules about? Do you require a permit to carry a firearm in Idaho?
Nope. I think you can actually conceal carry with nothing.
So as a citizen of Tennessee, if I show up and I'm concealed carrying and I don't have a permit, Idaho can't say, well, you can't conceal carry because you are a citizen of the state of Tennessee, not a citizen of the state of Idaho. Right? Now it's not technically a privilege.
Yeah, that's right.
But anything that you as a citizen of Idaho are allowed to do, I must be allowed to do when I'm in Idaho. Right? So going from one state to another doesn't make you a second-class citizen just because you are in a different state.
Okay.
Right.
Oh, yes.
Now, so if you think about it, and the reason the term privilege and immunity, rights are often mischaracterized.
Yeah.
People refer to compare a privilege to the antithesis of a right. That's not legally or etymologically correct. A right is a just privilege or immunity. So the First Amendment says I have immunity from restrictions on freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of press. That's a right. It's a just immunity from government action. The Fifth Amendment says I can have the assistance of counsel. That is a just privilege. It is a right because it's a just privilege. Those privileges and immunities don't cease to exist when you cross a state border. Now, this gets to an interesting point because a lot of states will not recognize the carry permits of other states. I live in the state of Tennessee. Tennessee recently adopted permitless carry. Some people call it constitutional carry. What Tennessee did is not constitutional carry. It is permitless carry. So I can carry in the state of Tennessee without a permit. I happen to have a permit because I had one before I moved here, and B, it becomes useful when I go to communist other states that require a permit. However, there are a lot of states that don't recognize my permit. So, for example, when I go back to this, if I go back to visit family in the state of New York, the state of New York does not recognize my Tennessee carry permit. Now, where this comes up is privileged immunities. Whoops, where we go here. What I'm looking for is so you talk about section 1, full faith and credit shall be given in each state to the public acts, records, and judicial proceedings of every other state. Now, I have a Tennessee driver's license. Every state in the union recognizes my Tennessee driver's license because they are giving full faith and credit to the records of Tennessee that I have passed the minimum requirements of Tennessee to operate a motor vehicle. By the way, I have both my license covers both four-wheeled vehicles, both cars and motorcycles. So I can drive a motorcycle in any state in the union, but not every state in the union will give full faith and credit to my Tennessee carry permit, which is one of the reasons why I also happen to have an Idaho carry permit, because so many states recognize Idaho's out-of-state carry permits. It covers like 40 states, 40 of the 50 states. It's a lot. But it's, again, one of those things where it says it, but states like to ignore it because nobody holds them accountable. Make sense?
Yeah, I was just, my biggest thing was what the heck was a privilege and what was an immunity?
Yeah. Privilege is something you are allowed to do, and immunity is something that you cannot be prevented from. You are immune from those actions. And a right is simply a just privilege or immunity. And an unalienable right is a just privilege or immunity granted you by your creator, not by government, meaning government can't take it away. They can infringe on it, but they're criminal when they do so. But too many people don't know how to stand up for themselves, and that gets into a whole other situation.
So there's unalienable rights, and then there's a just right.
There are so rights can be. There are two different ways of categorizing rights. You have alienable versus unalienable. And alienable just means it can be sold, it can be taken away. So you have an unalienable right to life. Government didn't give you life. Government can't legally take away your life unless they go through due process to protect your rights, right? Now, you don't have an unalienable right to vote. The right to vote was created by the Constitution. It was created by government. Therefore, government can effectively regulate it, right? The main difference between an unalienable right and an alienable right is whether or not it can be regulated by government. Unalienable rights cannot, because government didn't give them. Alienable rights can, because governments did create them. They created these things. That's why it's not technically correct to say governments don't create rights. They create alienable rights. What they don't create are unalienable rights that supersede them. Now, rights are also positive and negative. and that's whether or not they are a privilege or immunity. So the example I had was, if I have, well, let's take the subpoena, since we were just talking about that. The defendant in this case, a lady and gentleman I know, they have a right to petition witnesses in their favor, meaning they have a just claim on my time. They can legally come and say, Paul, you have to show up and offer testimony in this case. That is a just claim on my time. It is a positive right, something that I'm required to do for them. Make sense? We see this. We also see this in the right to an attorney, right? You have a right to, was the Miranda, you have a right to attorney. If you can't afford one will be provided. The citizens of the United States pay taxes in part because there's a just claim on the state, on all the governments, to provide legal assistance, to provide an attorney for someone for a defendant who cannot afford one. That is a just claim. It's a positive. It's something that must be done for you, versus a negative right, which is an immunity, something that cannot be done to you. You cannot be deprived of your right to exercise your religion, freedom of speech, freedom of press, peaceably assemble, petition the government, keep and bear arms, be deprived of your right to be secure in your persons, houses, pays, effect. Those are all negative rights. And when we think of mostly when we're thinking of rights in the Bill of Rights, we're thinking of negative rights. In fact, President Obama, he used it in a derogatory way, but he was absolutely accurate, is that most of the Constitution is a list of negative rights, things that the government cannot do. He's absolutely right. That's his purpose, is to keep government in check. So, okay, more questions. Who's next?
Well, that kind of segues into the question I was going to ask.
Well, be my guest.
Are there any rights that you have found that are not yet protected by the Constitution?
Oh, yeah. In fact, that's the reason we have a Ninth Amendment, right? The Ninth Amendment, might as well quote it because I don't want to get it wrong. The Ninth Amendment says, the enumeration in the Constitution of certain rights shall not be construed to deny or disparage others retained by the people. So yes, there are rights that are not in the Constitution. There are rights that we don't know about them until somebody brings them up. The question we have to ask ourselves is, if someone brings up a right, is that a legitimate right? And I do a whole class on what is a right. What is a right? I mean, I do a whole hour. I go into detail. If you want to get detailed information about what a right is, go to Constitution Scholars. I believe it's part of the apprentice program. I believe it's also for sale. If not, I'll have to double check. But one of the what I do is I go through a bunch of people who claim rights. For example, people claim a right to not be offended. Right? You can't have a right to not be offended. Why? Because in order for you to legitimately exercise a right, it must not infringe on the rights of someone else. This is true of any right, right? So when President Biden says, the amendments, the rights to the amendments are not absolute, there's a way, there is a situation where he's sort of correct in that I cannot use my right to free speech to infringe on someone's right to a fair trial. I can't use my right to keep and bear arms to infringe on someone's right to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects. Right? There's that limitation. That wasn't the context he was using it, but there is a grain of truth in what he was saying. So for any of us to legitimately exercise a right, It cannot infringe on the rights of another. Therefore, for a right to be legitimate, you must be capable of exercising it without infringing on the rights of another. And the examples I like to use are carrying firearms on private property and your right to health care, right? So carrying firearms on private property. You have a right to your property. Right? You cannot be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. The pursuit of happiness is property plus. So I own my house. I own the land that it's on. I get to decide whether or not people can bring firearms onto my property. You can do the same with your property. You have the legitimate right to say, I do not want firearms, or under what conditions you will let firearms. Right? I have a gentleman who likes to come over and dove hunt on my land. Every year he comes over and he asks for permission. I tell him where he can dove hunt, what the rules are. As long as he abides by those rules, he can do that. I have seen many people claim that their right to keep and bear arms supersedes my property rights. I find it very interesting because I think they would react very differently if it was their property rights that were being, does that mean that my right to free speech means I can go into your house and swear a blue streak? Can I stand in front of your children and do a profanity-laden demonstration of anything? No. My right of free speech stops when I'm infringing on your control of your property. Same for Second Amendment. Second Amendment isn't special. It's just another right. It's just when they like to infringe upon it a lot. So when a private business puts a sign up that says no firearms allowed, they legally are allowed to. Generally, what I will do is I will ask the manager to come to the door and tell them I will not participate in their establishment as long as that sign is up. And if I can, I've done this before, where I'll bring out a wad of cash and say, this is the money I was going to spend here today that I cannot because you won't let me in your door. But that's private property. Public property, courthouses, public buildings, city, state parks, public schools, they are not allowed to do that because that's not private property. That is public property, meaning it's owned by the public. It's owned. You're part. If you are there, you're part owner. It's public property. Now, I saw this article. I haven't covered it yet in the radio program, but I plan to. There's a 16-year-old girl that was arrested, handcuffed, and taken out of school for refusing to wear a mask. When challenged, the Leos, she asked, am I being arrested? I think was it her lawyer? Was she being arrested for not wearing a mask? No, she was being arrested for, get this, trespass. How do you trespass on public property? Trespass, again, you know me, I like definitions. Come on. Oops, hit the right button, it would help. Trespass is defined, might help if I could type. Trespass. To enter unlawfully upon the land of another. That was a public school. That is public property. Meaning she has just as much right to be there, masked or unmasked, as anyone else. You cannot trespass on property that you are part owner of. Right? Ta-da! It's amazing what a little research you do. Now, let me pick on social medicine. So people claim the right to healthcare. Actually, let me do education because education is a little less. So people claim they have a right to education. Okay. So if you have a right to education, then you're claiming you have a just claim on other people's time, effort, and work. That you have teachers need to work for free because you have a just claim on their time. That the people who built the schools, you have a just claim on their time because, well, you had to have a school to hold the class in. So you have you say you're going to enslave the teachers, the administrators, the builders, Oh, don't forget the people that provide the gas and electricity, or the people that provide the books. You're telling me you're going to enslave them, make them work for nothing, make them provide all of this stuff because you have a just claim on their stuff because you have a right to an education. To which most people, no, we're just going to tax people to do this. Oh, so you're claiming a just claim on my money to pay for something to provide this for you. You're claiming the authority to go into my pocket and take my money. Well, no, we'll get the government to do it. Well, guess what? The government is a collective. If you can't do it individually, you cannot order a servant, a public servant, to do it for you. It is just as criminal for you to do that. Now, the one point I always like to make is all taxes are not theft. Right? Why? Article 1, Section 8, Clause 1 of the Constitution. Let me get there and so I can quote it properly. Article 1, Section 8, Clause 1 of the Constitution says, the Congress shall have the power to lay and collect taxes, duties, imposts, and excises. So Congress has the authority to collect taxes. Duties, imposts, excises, they're all forms of taxation. They have the power to do that. We, the people, have delegated them the authority to collect taxes, but they can collect these to pay the debts, provide for the common defense, and general welfare of the United States. So Congress can only legally collect taxes to do three things: pay the debts of the United States, provide for the common defense of the United States, and to provide for the general welfare of the United States. Not of the citizens, not of the several states, of the Union, of the United States. Everything Congress collects as taxes for beyond that is theft. So the military, not theft. You could say our federal courts, right? They're established by the Constitution. They're part of the general welfare of the United States. That's not theft. The Department of Education, that is theft. Department of Energy, that is theft. USDA, that is theft. It's the details, but it's the details that matter because most people think, well, the general welfare is whatever Congress wants it to be. James Madison wrote an excellent essay proving that to be false. Okay. Nothing in the chats. It's a pretty light crowd today. It looks like I've got one person on YouTube and I've got one person on Rumble, and I don't know if that's me. Well, I'm not playing it, but I've got the page up so I can see the chat, so I don't know. So, okay, more questions. How about you, North Dakota? Anybody got a question? Since before your sun glowed hot in the heavens, I have waited for a question. Yeah, I'm showing my old Star Trek, man. What can I say? I'm going to have to put that in a loop because one of the things with the Rumble live stream is, when I create it, they want a video as a pre-roll for people to watch before the stream actually starts. When I schedule the live stream, I've got to have a short video. I created one. I'm going to have to create one. I'm going to take that clip from Star Trek and say, since before your sun grew. And what can I say? I'm a geek. I'm not a nerd. I'm a geek. There is a difference. So any questions? Come on, we've got topics, discussion topics, ideas, thoughts. I know, Andy, you said I've been answering all the questions. See, Andy's been reading the book. So see, Andy's been cheating. He's been getting his questions answered ahead of time.
And I can't recommend it enough. Any question I've had in the past year, it's in there. and it's nothing too hard. I mean, I've been taking it. Well, I'm a little bit slow reader, but it's nice to absorb it. And if anyone is thinking about getting it, I fiercely recommend just buy it now. um, yeah, can't wait to finish it. There are a couple things I never thought of. Actually, in the I guess the grievances, I had no idea that the king was outsourcing, I guess, to the Indian tribes to attack, the colonies. Never knew that.
Oh yeah, back from the Declaration of Independence and the list
Yeah.
of grievances. So actually, Tunnel Lord, you're talking about putting the video on Gad. What about the one on the redress of grievances?
Oh, that'd be a good one too. Yeah, definitely. Definitely. Yeah.
So I did back on Independence Day. I did a post. I actually wrote what I called the redeclaration of independence, and I basically took the Declaration of Independence and basically only changed the words necessary to get it to apply, to see if I could make it apply to Washington, D.C. Now, here's the interesting thing. There are 27 specific grievances the colonists had against the king. I can make the exact same grievance against Washington, D.C., either the entire government or a part of the government. And I think the only one that I had to really kind of, how do I put this into current context? Had to do with the jurisdictions, the idea of how he was. I'm drawing blank on which specific grievance it was. There was one in there that dealt with, I think it was taking away for mock trials or whatnot. Basically, if you go through all 27 agreements, I only had to change a few words with the exception of like one. There's one that if I just change the words to apply to Washington, D.C., the English was so atrocious, I couldn't handle it and I had to rewrite the whole sentence. But well, how about, all right, let's if no one's got questions.
Right. I had one.
Okay, go ahead.
I was curious because I think a while ago the Supreme Court opined and said that
Thank you.
speech applies to like expression or for, the expression is protected by the First Amendment. And I thought, well, no, that can't be the case because speech and expression are two different things. Yeah.
So understand if you look at the First Amendment as a whole, right? Look at what's being protected. Your ability to exercise religion, your ability to communicate both verbally and textually, right? Speech and press, your right to assemble with other like-minded people, and your ability to petition the government for a redress of grievance. These are all really conscience protections, if you think about it. So what I want to do, let's go here, is understanding speech is a form of expression. It is sounds, it is words, it is spoken. It would also, I would even say, well, singing is a form of speech. So you're talking about verbal communication. But the other part that most people really screw up is freedom of the press has nothing to do with the news media. None, zip, zero, nada. Press, as defined in Noah Webster's 1828 dictionary, is the art or business of publishing. Now, let's take what we're doing here. This would fall under freedom of speech because we are using speech to communicate. It's being done in video, yes, but it's also being done via speech. We're talking to each other. Over here, I have a chat window. And if I'm chatting back and forth, well, that's not speech, is it? Well, it's not speech in the verbal sense, but it's the, you could say it's the idea of one-to-one communication. But when I post an article, well, that is the art, or in my case, also the business of press. I am publishing. So when people say expression, it's how do you express? In other words, does my freedom of speech extend to nonverbal art, which is generally, when they talk about freedom of speech, they're talking about nonverbal art. So so we've all heard about the Let's Go Biden chants, right? You've all heard the Let's Go Biden chants, right? So what if someone were to make, so let's say a without using words, just they would do a painting of Let's Go Brandon, or they would have the Let's Go Brandon sculpture, and it doesn't use words, but they're still expressing themselves. Would that be protected from Congress interfering with it? That is, I think, would fall under the idea of the Ninth Amendment, right? Yes, we protect freedom of speech. Yes, we protect freedom of press. Out of that, you can infer a protection of free expression in nonverbal, non-textual means. So video, sculptures, paintings, mimes, right? Here's a mime. These are all nonverbal. That would be a right that is not enumerated in the Constitution, but it would certainly, you could certainly make see the logic saying, listen, if I have the freedom to say, let's go Brandon, don't I have the freedom to burn the American flag? Because both of those are expressions of distaste with something to deal with America. By the way, I'm working on a face mask because there's still a few places to go. Private businesses, masks, I can't avoid them. Fine. So I decided I want to express myself through my face mask. Now, I was up at a university a couple weeks ago. I don't have the mask with me. I took a mask and I took a label maker, and on the mask, I put mandates are tyranny, worn under duress. So now I'm actually, I'm looking at, tell me if you guys would be interested. I'm putting those words on a cloth mask with the American flag upside down. Now, for those of you who don't know, an upside down flag is the international sign of distress. Ship at sea, military unit, you name it. If you fly your flag upside down, everybody knows we're in distress. Come help now. That is an expression. Am I publishing the mask? No, but it would be inferred. Is it truly freedom of speech? Well, it's technically freedom of expression, which is of which speech is a form of expression. So, now my biggest problem is most people misapply the First Amendment because the First Amendment starts out, Congress shall make no law. It's a pet peeve of mine. And it's really a pet peeve because in 3/4 of my SCOTUS review over the last few months have related in one way or another to complaints about the First Amendment and of trying to apply it to the states. What can I say? When it comes to the Constitution, lawyers are ignorant and apathetic. They don't know, they don't care.
I got another thing.
Sure.
Back in Reagan's time, I don't know who did it. I don't know if it was the legislature or some illegal act from the executive branch, but somebody during that time banned suing vaccine manufacturers. And I thought to myself, well, that can't be legal because that came from Congress and it violates the whole, they're not allowing you to redress your government for your grievances. So
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So all of these, that's, by the way, that's the same problem with Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act. They are violating your right to petition the government for redress of grievance with online providers. The problem is the idiots in the courts can't see this because it's too obvious. It's only one of several situations, but you're right. That is a violation when Congress did it. And I don't remember when it happened in Reagan's time. Obviously it has happened in President Bush's time. It's happened under Obama. It happened under Trump. But you're correct. You're depriving us of the right to petition the government for redress of grievance. Now, here's the interesting thing. If a company requires you to get a vaccine, an experimental drug, as a condition of employment, they are liable for any adverse effects you have from that. Now, Congress has tried to say, well, no, you cannot sue. I'm sorry. That is a violation of the First Amendment because you are depriving me of my right to petition the government for a redress of grievance. Right? You're illegally protecting them. What I like to do is go to the companies and say, you do understand that if one of your employees, this is what I advise people when they ask me about it. You go to the HR department, you say, you do realize that the company is legally liable for any adverse effects I have from taking this because it is an experimental use. They say, no, it's been approved by the FDA. Say, no, it hasn't. The only one approved by the FDA is the one labeled Comirnaty, which is not yet available in the United States. So there is no FDA approved vaccine available in the United States. They say, well, Congress said we can't be sued. That's a violation of the First Amendment because you're depriving me the right to petition my government for redress of grievance. By the way, if I get sick from this stuff, my purpose in life will be to make your life a living hell because you have done this to me, and I will make sure that everybody knows it. I will sue you every way I can. And look at what happened. There was there was a guy just had a case go to the Supreme Court. The New York State Rifle and Pistol Association. That started with a guy in New York who applied for a New York carry permit. New York pistol permits are extremely cumbersome to get. They are may issue. Basically means that a judge, it's all up to a judge. If the judge doesn't want to issue you a license, you don't get a license. He didn't get a license and he's suing because he was willing to keep going. He's got the National Rifle and Pistol Association and their and the NRA are funding his lawsuit, but he's not going to be before the Supreme Court, or his case is, because he was willing to stand up and basically not cave in simply because New York State said no. So, okay, I have a question here in the chat. Unlike some amendments that have been stretched beyond their meaning, really does include other forms of expression. Well, as I was saying, Warhol, I think that argument could be made, especially under the Ninth Amendment. Speech does have a specific term. It involves verbal communication, but the Ninth Amendment says, listen, just because it's not enumerated doesn't mean it's not protected. And when you look at speech and you look at press, you are definitely looking at forms of expression. I would say it's logical to extend that beyond that. People communicate disorders, and it definitely makes a distinction between speech, verbal, and language. The average individual equates speech and language together as communication. The right to free speech, that's protected. And it actually, you bring up an interesting point, because the distinction between speech and language, technically, what about a person using sign language? That's not speech, but it would, to use an often used legal term, it would fall under the penumbra of speech. So if someone is using sign language to communicate, it's certainly a form of expression that would be equivalent to speech. So yeah, I don't think we're disagreeing. I think maybe we're just looking at the minute details of saying, well, if you're protecting freedom of speech and freedom of press, does that include the freedom to use nonverbal communication? nonverbal languages, nonverbal forms of communication. If not specifically the language of speech, it certainly would be covered under the Ninth Amendment, as in it's still expression. It's just not enumerated in the Constitution. That's a great point. The distinction between speech and language, and what does that mean for nonverbal communication? So I don't think that the only place I've really seen that become an issue have been debates over burning the American flag, which I find interesting, not simply because, okay, you're talking about a form of expression, but according to US flag code, the only proper way to dispose of an American flag is to burn it. So if you have a flag that's all faded and beat up and worn out, according to the US flag code, the only proper way to dispose of it is to burn it, which is what they're talking about with flag burning. So thanks for all. That's kind of why we're here, is getting stuff discussed. All right. Let's see. I was thrown out of my son's school board meeting for refusing to segregate myself and to sit in the unmasked section. Masked and unmasked were allowed into the same room, and the seating announcement was made 10 minutes prior to the start of the meeting. Okay. When you say thrown out, Papa Rez, what specifically did they do? Was law enforcement involved? And what did they, if so, what were they charging you with to remove you from the premises? That's one of the, that's a follow-up that's kind of to dig into that a little bit. Because as I was talking before about public schools are public property, meaning they are owned by the public. The government that owns them is a collection of the people. So technically, you can't be, the point I was making is you cannot trespass on property you are part owner of. Therefore, you cannot trespass on public property. Now, if you're escorted given no valid reason, okay. Here's what I recommend do, Papa Rez. Go to my website, constitutionstudy.com. I want you to search for, probably the easiest thing is just search for placard, Placard. In fact, I'll tell you what I'll do. Let me see if I can find it and post it in there. Because the law enforcement, the board and the law enforcement officer that escorted you out, that made you leave, committed a federal crime. Right. And what I want to do is I want to arm you with some information, because this is, I want to get you, I've got several things, but I want to find this because this will help you. Yes, this is what I want. Okay. So I'm going to put this is a link. I'm putting it in the comment here. Let me put it in the chat here for the Zoom people. And let me share. This is my Knowing Your Rights placard. I wrote this specifically to request somebody to deal with businesses with rights violations. Now, Papa Rez, here's what I want you to look at. If you look at the center column, middle item, Fifth Amendment, no person shall be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. Right below that's the 14th Amendment. It says that no state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges and immunities of a citizen of the United States, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. Now, they, by segregating you, they are depriving you of your liberty. By attempting to force you to wear a mask, they're depriving you of your property. When they escorted you out of the building, they're depriving you of your liberty to participate in your government. Why is this important? The right-hand column, federal law. Let me see if I can zoom in on this. right? Whoever, under color of any law, statute, ordinance, regulation, or custom, willfully subjects any person in any state, territory, commonwealth, possession, or district to the deprivation of any rights, privileges, or immunities secured or protected by the Constitution or laws of the United States shall be fined under this title or imprisoned not more than 1 year or both. I would go to the school board. I would have a copy of this. I would point out that to segregate you deprives you of your liberty, to force you to put a mask on deprives you of the property you have in your own body. Doing so under penalty of any law, ordinance, regulation, or custom is a violation of Title 18 of the United States Code, Section 242. That when the officer escorted you out of the building, he was committing a federal crime. The school board was committing a federal crime. That while your first phone call may be to a lawyer, your second phone call will be to the FBI and the U.S. Attorney's Office, because they are committing federal crimes. Now, then you have to decide what's next. See, they may look at that and go, oh, crap, we're committing federal crimes. This guy knows us. Oh my God, what are we going to do? They may back off. If, on the other hand, they still throw you out, the question then becomes, okay, are you going to, they're calling your bluff. Are you bluffing or not? Are you going to call the FBI? Are you going to call the U.S. Attorney's Office? Are you going to try and file a complaint because they have committed federal crimes? Oh, there's plenty of tyranny going on. Let's see, negative code. So what I would do, Pop Res, listen, this is up
Paul,
to
you're
you.
still sharing. Yeah.
Yeah. This is up to you. This is a question of how far do you want to push it? What I would do is I would go to the next meeting unmasked, but armed with information. See, the last time you were there, my idea was, what do I do? Prepare beforehand. I would have that. You can download it from the website. There's a link right there to download it. Make a copy, print it, bring out copies, hand it out. Point out what they're doing is a crime. Give them the opportunity to do the right thing. When they don't do the right thing, then you go out. Then you contact the FBI and the U.S. Attorney's Office. But understand, the FBI is not going to pay any attention to you. The FBI is just as ignorant about the Constitution as most of the government, right? They're going to look and say, well, they had a mandate. No, they've broken federal law. This is the supreme law of the land. Their job is to uphold it. I would certainly not expect the FBI to do anything, but I'd file the charges anyway. I'd file the complaint anyway. And again, it's not simply a question. They require you to wear a mask or to sit segregated. Does that mean that Rosa Parks was not having her rights denied by being segregated to the back of the bus? Right? You're being treated as a second-class citizen without due process. They're depriving you of your right to be at liberty to sit where you want without due process. All right, so maybe you're on a terrorist list. And again, how far are you willing to go? Because the question is, if we don't stand up when it's a school board meeting, then what's going to happen when it's not simply a school board meeting? When you're told you can't shop at a grocery store anymore because you didn't get a vaccine. When you're told you can't get your driver's license renewed without getting a vaccine. When you're told that you can't cross state lines without getting a vaccine. Granted, if we do not deal with the problems when they're small, they get big. And let me bring up a quote. I use this quote. It's I believe it's a poem made by Martin Niemöller during the Nazi occupation. And where is it? Here it is. He said, first they came for the socialists, and I did not speak out because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for me. So the way I look at this is saying, okay, first they came for the people who wouldn't wear masks, and I didn't do anything because, well, a mask wasn't that big a deal. Well, then they came for the unvaccinated, and I didn't do anything because, well, I didn't think, I thought vaccines were okay. Then they came for the CRT deniers because, but I did nothing because, well, I don't have any kids in school. And then they came for me, and there was no one left for me. I am sure I'm on a list. In fact, I don't like it. I'm already on YouTube. Facebook has booted me off. YouTube has booted me off. YouTube, I'm waiting for them to boot me off. They've already given me a warning. I know I'm on a list somewhere. Is being on a list such a scary thing that we will voluntarily hand over our rights to avoid being on a list? If that's all it takes, they don't need to violate your rights. You'll give them up voluntarily. All they have to do is threaten to put you on the list. The very idea that you're put on a list for upholding the law of the land. See, what you've brought to the reason I used that document is the law. The Constitution is the supreme law of the land, Article 6, Clause 2. So when you quote the 14th Amendment, you're quoting the law. When you quote the United States Code, you're quoting the law. If you are a terrorist for upholding the law, then you aren't the terrorist, they are. Because they're intimidating us into submission for violating the law. As Abraham Lincoln put it, the people are the rightful masters of both Congresses and courts, not to overturn the Constitution, but to overturn the men who pervert the Constitution. Ladies and gentlemen, there's a whole lot of perverting going on. And it's about time we stopped accepting it and acting like we are subjects and slaves of those in government. They are public servants. They work for us, not the other way around. We define the limits of their power, not the other way around. We created those offices. We can wipe them out and create new ones just like them at a moment's notice. The Declaration says when governments are destructive of protecting our rights, it is our right to alter or abolish it. We have to stand up. We have to. And yeah, you know what? Some people are going to be put on lists. Some people are going to be put in jail. It's already happened. There are people in jail. I just recorded an episode on a radio program. I was talking about how Google is conspiring with the government to turn over your tracking information about you. They've already turned over data. Anybody that was at their location services said they were on the Capitol on January 6th, they've already turned over to law enforcement. They're doing keyword search warrants. The government is criminal. They are, at this point, more often than not, the government in Washington, D.C. is criminal. If we can't protect what is local, how can we, if we can't fix a small problem locally, how are we ever going to fix the problems in our states and in our country? So I know it may be scary, and the decision is ultimately yours. I can't tell you what you have to do, but I will tell you that if we don't stand up today, as Reagan said, one day we'll have to tell our children and our children's children what it once was like in America when men were free. All right, do you think it will ever end, the government overreach? Hayek and The Road to Serfdom and Milton allude to the fact that once government has power, programs, policies, they won't relinquish it. Do I ever think it will ever end? Will it end? No, I don't think it will end. The government overreach started way back in 1788. Right? Think about it. The was it the 1790 election after the 1788 election, presidential election, you had a president attempt to pack the courts. it doesn't end. What we can do is live more or less free. It's not, it's never going to disappear. We will, we have given up so many of our rights that we have to fight to get them back. We've shown ourselves to be sheep. Yes, we have. But interestingly enough, when we declared independence, only approximately 3% of the colonists actually fought for independence. It's amazing what a small and dedicated group can do. And it doesn't require violence. I'm actually for peaceful noncompliance, right? I will not comply with a law that is empty and void. That, by the way, that's also on the placard. We want a government to save us. We, the American people, shoveled over our rights faster and faster through the 20th century. It started, you saw it in 1860s, right after the Civil War. You saw it again in the early 1890s to 1910s. We saw it in the 1960s and 70s. We saw it again in 2000 with the Patriot Act. We saw it again in 2012 and 14 with the Obamacare. We simply hand over our rights. We want government to take care of us. But for the most part, think about it, 90% of the people you're encountering were educated by a government school. Calling them public schools is a nicety. They are government run, they are government mandated, they are government enforcement. They were indoctrinated into being subjects of government. When we educate people about being free citizens, about not being subject of government, but being its master, then we start living free. And we encounter people, and to paraphrase a Bible quote, they'll ask you for the liberty that they see in you. When you walk around as a free person, people start saying, wait a second, what's that? And we spread the word. But I believe the foundation of all of this is education, being educated on what the Constitution says, what the legitimate laws of the United States say, and having that foundation to build on to say, no, school board, you cannot segregate me. It is actually a federal crime because you're depriving me of my liberty to be in this meeting, to fully participate in this meeting. You're treating me as a second-class citizen, and you have no due process to do that. Show me the peer-reviewed control group test that shows masks prevent the spread of a respiratory virus. Show it to me. Prove to me that I am a danger to somebody else. Prove to me that there's even a possibility, that there's even a reasonable, a probable cause that me wearing this mask makes me less of a danger to other people. See, it's not supposed to be on us to prove our point. Government has to prove that. That's what due process means. The government must follow a process that protects our rights. They have the burden of proof, not us. Stand up and stand up to that. It's also one of the reasons why I believe we need to find people and organizations that will protect our rights and do business with them. It's why I'm looking for other web hosting options. It's why I keep telling people, listen, if you put a sign in your window, we respect your rights, no mask, no vaccine, no problem, I'll do business with you. I don't care if you're a grocery store, a big box store, a mom and pop restaurant, or the corner drugstore. If you put a sign out that says you respect my rights and you actually do it, I will do business with you. If you come to me and say, listen, if I do this, the insurance company's going to come after me, let's figure out how we can do it cash. We have, the founding fathers pledged their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor to this idea of liberty and independence. So, yeah, when we talk about pledging our lives, we tend to think about dying for something. Well, how about living for something? How about living your life as a free citizen? How about being willing to pay more to support someone that is not taking away your rights? How about the honor we used to consider so sacred to our lives? The idea that you could shake a man's hand and that was as good as a written contract. The honor to say, when I will defend your rights, even if I disagree with you, I will defend to the death your right to say it. The honor of doing that. That's what needs to be reborn in America. And yeah, it's going to start as a small seed. And you know, we've spent 150 years making this mess. We have spent 150 years turning America into a pigsty of rights, where our rights are treated as garbage, where governments think they have the authority to determine to infringe on our rights simply because they think they have the right to do so, where even the American people believe they have the right to tell you how to live your life because, well, they want to. You don't spend 150 years fouling your nest and expect it to be clean as daisies in an instant. It's not happening tomorrow. It's not happening in 2022. It's not happening in 2024. It may not even happen in the 21st century. But do we want to live our lives more and more free or more and more enslaved? Even though I know I will probably never see the day where America is nearly as free as it was when it was founded, and the odds of me seeing it as free as it was when I was born are pretty unlikely. But you see, I have a daughter who's inheriting this country that I'm leaving to her. So no matter what, I want it freer than it is today. And if it's tomorrow, next election, next year, next election, next decade, America is freer than it is today. So what if we don't fix it all? I've made it better. And then it's my turn to hand it off to the next generation for them to do the same. These sometimes are big, hairy issues. They can be scary. They can be intimidating. There are people that will bully us to get us to comply. They'll look at it and say, listen, you can't fight City Hall. You'll never win. I don't have to win. I just have to make things a little better. All I really have to do is say no one more time, and they say yes. And that's why we come here, right? That's to learn a little bit, to find out more, to help encourage each other, to look at this and say, hey, Papa Rez, he had a problem. All right, let's encourage him. Papa Rez, I don't know where you are, but I'd hope if we've got anybody in that area, they would go to that school board with you and support you. I don't know if you're here at the beginning, but one of the people, he's not online, but he sent me an article out of a local newspaper. His school board was considering mask mandates. He got the law. He got the Wyoming Constitution. He was able to quote the Wyoming law. He was prepared. He stood up and said, listen, this is the law. The Constitution says this. The law says that. If you institute a mask mandate, you're breaking the law. He looked at a law enforcement officer in the eye and said, if they do this, it's your duty to arrest them. He brought friends so that if his time ran out, his friends would yield their time back to him. Let's find people that will support Papa Rez, wherever you are. North Carolina. I don't know if we've got people in North Carolina. You know what, Papa Rez? Let's do this. Tell you what we'll do. Send me an email. It's paul@constitutionstudy.com. And maybe if you want, we can talk about it on the radio program. If nothing else, I can make mention of maybe take the town and see if there are other people that will help come and support freedom and liberty and get rid of this idea of segregation in our school boards. Because if they're going to segregate us on masks, they'll segregate us on vaccines, and they'll just stick us to the back of the bus. What can we do? What can we do to help? So yeah, send that out, and we'll see what we can do to help you out. With that, we're at the bottom of the hour. We had a slow start, but boy, we had a pretty good finish on this, didn't we? I want to thank everybody for showing up. We had a great time. If you missed the beginning, I'll have the recording up probably sometime tomorrow afternoon. This is what we do. I enjoy this. I enjoy this discussion, this debate, this talking things through. Please check out the website, constitutionstudy.com, and please share that information. That's all there. Constitution Study, everything there is for you to use and for you to share. Share it. There's no charge for it. Share it. Let's see what we can do to not simply stand our ground, but run to the defense of people who are standing their ground. And I'll see you all here, hopefully, on the live quick Q&A in a couple of weeks. Good night, everybody.